in the port of Hafia, there was a Russian tanker that brought stolen grain that was then unloaded. Now, the Ukrainian government says that they informed the Israelis of this as it was about to dock, when it docked, and that the Israelis didn't do anything, that they took the stolen grain and they allowed the ship to leave port, when the Ukrainians were hoping that the Israelis were going to arrest those that were facilitating the acceptance of stolen grain. Now, after they had allowed these people facilitating that theft and giving it to the Israelis, this grain stolen from occupied territories, the Ukrainian government issued, formal protests. They said, we tried to, sources said that they informed the Israelis and they didn't act. And so there was a question of why didn't they arrest them? Then there was a question of why didn't they just, stop in the middle of the process as they were being informed? Why didn't they do anything? Well, now that the issue got some attention, there was a little murmurs, but it wasn't as much of a diplomatic spat. The Ukrainians were not happy. They discussed it somewhat publicly, but they left the issue somewhat alone with a little protest, because they were hoping that by giving protest now and making it like both issuing, statements privately that they could maybe stop it. And since they weren't able to stop it and the private asks to stop it weren't enough, then they're going to have to make it more of a public conversation, because maybe the Israeli people won't put up with it. Maybe Israel will not want to run afoul of other European states. Maybe, the Israeli government won't want it to be a public conversation, because despite the position of the United States government, most Americans support Ukraine and would not like what's going on. They would not like that, right? And Israel already has a big enough problem in losing its popularity in one of its biggest power backers, and one of its most significant ally. Does it need to also sink those who both support Ukraine and Israel? And there are a significant amount of people who support Ukraine and Israel. I see them. Do you want to piss off those people who then might maybe even reevaluate their position in other areas? Maybe they'll say, wait a second, didn't Putin and Netanyahu appear on all those campaign posters? Wait, didn't the Russians and the Israelis coordinate very closely when it came to the bombing of Syria, as Israel continued to bomb Syria and Russia continued to bomb Syria? Wait a minute, man, wait. Aren't there defense contracts when it comes to Israeli defense companies with Russia? They've done like hundreds of millions of dollars of business with them to like help Russia when it comes to some of its AI weapons technology, which obviously is being used feverishly in Ukraine. Wait a second. And then people start asking questions. And so when it comes to the public PR perspective, Israel had already like gone out there and like face planted, right? Face planted. And now as they step up again, PR wise, we are finding out that another shipment of stolen Ukrainian grain is en route to the port in Hafia. Somebody said, apparently, bring it in. Because they wouldn't be going there if the Israelis said, don't bring it in. You're not allowed to bring it in. They wouldn't be going there if the people on the other end of that deal were saying it's too dangerous, it's too diplomatically sensitive, the Israeli government asked us not to, XYZ, you can't bring it in. They wouldn't spend the time and the money and the insurance costs and everything else you need to do to ship it from A to B when Russian ships could be doing a lot of other business right now if they didn't have a sale. This is not a leisure cruise. This is the Russian government selling more of Ukraine's stolen grain, a second shipment now to the Israelis. Now, it has not reached port as far as I'm aware, and so the unloading process has not begun, and so it seems that the Ukrainians are starting to make some noise about it. I think that the logic is from the Ukrainian side. We tried to approach them privately during the first shipment, and they didn't stop it. And then as it was unloading the grain, we continued to ask. Then we started to make some public noise after, they got away and they didn't arrest anybody. But we were the public noise they probably hoped would stop them from doing it again. When it now is clear that another ship is going, which would not have been approved if there wasn't some okay from the other side. Let me just make that clear. The Israelis know what they're doing. There is no possibility that they're like, oopsies, all my grain is stolen. Oopsies, all my grain is stolen again. Oopsies, I missed all of Ukraine's DMs. Anybody making that argument is like, I mean, you're just, I mean, come on, you're a fool. You're a fool. I mean, the Israelis might like make arguments about the legalistic, oh, file in the courts, XYZ. You're a fool if you think the Israelis don't know what they're getting. I mean, Vladimir Putin and Netanyahu's relationship has been cordial and working in the past. They have, if defense companies can do contracts with them, why wouldn't the Israelis think that right now, during this war, where, you know, Netanyahu wants to get support before elections, that he wouldn't want to bring in low-priced grain, because that's how they get people to buy it. They sell it at a cheap price because people don't like their international reputation being associated with that. But the low-priced grain and a cordial enough relationship with Vladimir Putin was enough to get the government of Benjamin Netanyahu to continue to allow this to keep going. Because if they wanted to stop it, they could. Okay? With all the things that Israel has done, if they wanted to stop it, they could. And so it seems that the Ukrainians have probably come to the conclusion
Burns
that
is an immoral,
morally corrupt, bankrupt man. Hey, General Mark, thank you so much for the tier 1 sub. It means up for 38 months. My God, what a time. What an amount of time to be subbed to this channel. I appreciate you spending all the time here. Okay, thank you. I hope you miss all the birthdays of your friends and relatives just to watch my VODs over and over and give me ad revenue. I appreciate it. No, thank you though. I appreciate it. So I think the Ukrainians probably came to the conclusion, like, we tried to make this a somewhat polite public discussion last time after we tried to have a private discussion, and none of that worked. So now let's have a different discussion. And this is what the president of Ukraine at noon Ukraine time today, in any normal country, purchasing stolen goods is an act that entails legal liability. This applies in particular to grain stolen by Russia. Another vessel carrying such grain has arrived at a port in Israel and is preparing to unload. So it did arrive now. I remember last I heard that it was on the way there, but as of noon today, it is preparing to unload. This is not and cannot be legitimate business. The Israeli authorities cannot be unaware of which ships are arriving at the country's ports and what cargo they are carrying. Russia is systematically seizing grain on temporarily occupied Ukrainian land and organizing its export through individual links linked to the occupiers. Such schemes violate the laws of the state of Israel itself. This is true. Israel's laws do not allow it to import these types of products. So there's been a lot of discussion about international law around this, and I've seen some people trying to make the argument, well, technically, stealing the stolen grain isn't illegal under international law. I don't want to have an international law discussion. I don't 100% buy that. I don't want to have an international law discussion. It's immoral, and it's not legal under their own country's code. Because I remember seeing Pete Hegseth say that we will give our enemies no quarter during like the morning flows of the Iran war, as he, after his, his prayer session, he starts saying the most Christian rhetoric on earth, I suppose. And he said, we give our enemies no quarter. And I wanted to have like the international law discussion about that, but under the U.S. Army handbook, saying stuff like that is not allowed for our like military leadership or for anybody in the armed forces. Like that's illegal under both international law and American law. And in this case, yeah, it's illegal under Israeli law. Ukraine has taken all necessary steps through diplomatic channels to prevent such incidents. However, we see that yet another such vessel has not been stopped. I've instructed the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to inform all partners of our state about the situation. Based on information from our intelligence service, Ukraine is preparing a relevant sanctions package that will cover both those directly transporting this grain and the individuals and legal entities attempting to profit from this criminal scheme. That means the Israelis directly involved in the scheme, the individuals, the Israeli institutions, the businesses that are involved in this, as well as those who are moving the grain. So it could be both those on the ship, and I wonder if this would include those who are actually unloading the grain, the companies that are involved in the unloading process of said grain. But the Ukrainian government is threatening a sanctions package, and they're preparing it. So this is now no longer private diplomatic protest, turns into polite diplomatic statement publicly, turns into this response, forceful response, backed by the threat of sanctions against those involved, as well as a call out of Israeli hypocrisy, which Well, Zelensky's not the first one to do that. Based on the information from our intelligence services, Ukraine is preparing a relevant sanctions package that will cover both those directly transporting the grain and the individuals and legal entities attempting to profit from this criminal scheme. We will also coordinate with European partners to ensure that the relevant individuals are included in the European sanction regime. If that is true, then that's going to be really bad for those businesses that, I mean, a lot of Israeli businesses do a lot of business in Europe. They do quite a bit of business with EU states. If you have these institutions being barred from business with in the European Union, that can do quite damage. It's not just Ukraine saying we will be the first European nation state to sanction Israel, which would be true, but we're going to see if we can get the EU to get involved in sanctioning Israel. Now, it's not the state of Israel, mind you. It is not, we're going to sanction all Israeli businesses. It's concentrated specifically in those involved in the stealing of Ukrainian grain. Maybe this is because the Israelis provided some early detection systems to help the Ukrainians. Maybe because there's been some minimal amount of humanitarian aid that was provided by Israel. But physical, material, military support has not been an Israeli specialty when it comes to supporting the Ukrainians. Much to Zelensky's chagrin. I remember recently when he was talking about their anti-drone tech and, you know, with their technology and their drone advances, when they were asked, like, hey, are you going to use this for the Israelis? Because he was doing deals with the Gulf states, but not doing deals with the Israelis. He just said curtly, like all the diplomatic language had been drained from the statement from Zelensky. He just said, the Israelis know what we need, and they know what they need. Essentially, like it's just become statecraft. There seems to be no, from the first Jewish president of Ukraine, no less, there seems to be no like bilateral relations fluff. And the fact that he directly calls out the bilateral relations, and the foreign minister of Ukraine directly calls out the bilateral relations in this next statement, is to be noted. Ukraine counts on partnership and mutual respect with every state. We are genuinely working to enhance security, particularly in the Middle East region. We expect that the Israeli authorities will respect Ukraine and refrain from actions that undermine our bilateral relations. Purchasing stolen goods. This is the second one. Didn't get as much viewership, but I want to read the full statement. Purchasing stolen goods in all normal countries is an act that entails legal liability. This applies, oh no, it's the same thing. It's just in Ukrainian. Okay, sorry. He makes like Ukrainian posts, and then he makes posts where he does both. But then it just looks like that. Here's Zelensky's thread in the morning, you know, include it in your news feed. Now, that is not the only statement that's been put forward. Here is a statement from the foreign minister. Friendly, and this was made 8 hours after, no, this was actually made in preparation for a Zelensky statement, which was made earlier today. Friendly Ukrainian-Israeli relations have potential to benefit both countries, and Russia's illegal trade with stolen grain should not undermine them. It is difficult to understand Israel's lack of appropriate response to Ukraine's legitimate request regarding the previous vessel that delivered stolen goods to Haifa. Now that another such vessel has arrived, we once again warn Israel against accepting the stolen grain and harming our relations. In this context, we have already officially summoned the Israeli ambassador to the Minister of Foreign Affairs tomorrow morning to present our protest note and request appropriate action. So the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs responds to this, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But they've informed the embassy, they've informed them in private, they've informed them politely in public, and now they've informed them angrily in public, and also directly again to the ambassador, which probably got a response before, but is now getting a formal protest. Now, the response to this has been interesting. We're first going to start with like the pro-Israel commentary response. This is Mossad commentary, a very pro-Israel account. And now let me be clear. There are Israelis that are disgusted by this. There are Israeli accounts online that are calling this out. Right? I remember seeing one person saying it's not illegal under international law, and an Israeli responding, but it's illegal under Israeli law. And so there are Israelis that sympathize with Ukraine. There are Israelis that support Ukraine, but the government is the government. You know, personal sympathies might be nice for a fundraiser or two, but when it comes to the policy of the state, it's the policies of the state. Dylan is Haifa. Sorry, I can't pronounce it. because I've never been there. It took me going to all the Ukrainian places to learn their names properly. I had to hear the locals say it again and again and again. I am the biggest Americanoid that has ever walked the earth. Here's some Assad commentary. Zelensky picks a fight with Israel over grain. Now, I just want to say that is not only dismissive, but it completely like ignores who Ukrainians are. You think you're just negotiating with like another Israel? You think you're just negotiating with like you're negotiating with a state that has built its culture so deeply in the grain and wheat industry that it's literally half of their flag. The bottom half, the yellow, is supposed to represent the wheat fields. If you listen to music, you hear songs about wheat fields. If you read Shevchenko's poetry, Ukraine's national poet, or any other poetry, you hear of the wheat fields. If you look at the music videos and videos produced by the Ukrainian press, it has quite a lot of wheat fields. When you look at the art and murals produced all across rural Ukraine, guess what's on it? Does anyone want to guess what's on it? Wheat fields. The country is so embedded in farming and agriculture culture. And it goes back hundreds of years and is literally not only built into the psychology of its people, but is built into the soil they step upon due to the black soil being so fertile. There are other agricultural goods that also have this weight, sunflowers being an obvious example, sunflower oil. But wheat is on the flag. It's not a sunflower on the flag, even though the sunflower is national flower. It's wheat on the flag. And so when you go out there and say, oh, over grain, those are farms in cases where people have fled. And then the farms have been given to other people. And now they're producing grain that has been taken by the Russian state, sold, and continues to fund the war effort. Look, I don't know what you expect their reaction to be, but like, oh, over food. Yeah, one of the basic necessities of life. You know, if like somebody could say, oh, you're angry at the Strait of Hormuz being blockaded on your economy. Oh, this is a national security issue. We have to worry about that. And you're talking to like the Sudanese who get like over 50% of their fertilizer from there. Pakistanis are going to be affected. All these other countries where like the poorest are going to be the most demonstrably negatively affected. You know, people skip meals. People have to figure stuff out. And it's like, no, you shouldn't be dismissive of that, especially when you talk about an agricultural good that has so much cultural significance. Let's be clear. If any private company is knowingly buying grain stolen from Ukrainian land, that's a problem. Deal with it. So much of the defense has been, well, it's not good. I acknowledge it's bad, but, and here's the but turning this into an international confrontation with Israel, while Ukraine is years into a brutal war with Russia, hundreds of thousands dead, and no clear victory in sight, this is a distraction. It's like being in the middle of a fight you're losing and supposedly yelling across the room about someone touching your sandwich. You shouldn't. Well, yeah, if your people are freezing to death and people are trying to figure out how to pay for food, yeah. Stay focused, win your war, rally your allies. Don't manufacture side conflicts to change the narrative. Now, there's been like follow-ups, you know, for example, let me spell it out for those who are clearly confused. I do not condone the use of the grain. Zelensky made grain sales an international crisis, a stupid move. And if you think I'm a Russian propagandist, read my post. Look, there's other people arguing that, you know, Egypt stole the grain, bought stolen grain. Turkey bought stolen grain. All these other countries bought stolen grain. And, you know, why is Zelensky picking a fight over Israel? You know, why is Zelensky choosing Israel? Number one, because the Egyptians agreed not to. Okay, that's the first thing. The Egyptians said they wouldn't do it. I spoke with President El-Sisi. The president informed me that Egypt will no longer accept grain exported by Russia from our temporarily occupied territories. So Egypt did it. And then they said, oops, you know, now that you've put some pressure on us, never mind. You know who else they pressured to not do it? Turkey, another nation state. You know, other people in the region, what we could call them, you know, Israel's literal neighbors. And it's like, oh, Israel's getting picked on again. Oh, poor Israel. Oh, poor little Israel. Whoa, God, Israel's getting picked on once again. As they're actively continuing to buy the stolen grain. And they can't defend buying the stolen grain. They can't defend it under their own legal system, as Israel takes pride in being a democracy with institutions that won't follow its own laws. Look, this was a private confrontation. Then, after they continued, it became a semi-public confrontation where they're like, we don't like that. Then when we see they're continuing to do it anyway, another ship's on their way, another ship is docked, another ship is about to unload more grain. It seems Israel's going to continue with the behavior. That's when it became a public diplomatic incident. There was a formal protest issued with the embassy before Zelensky came out and started talking about sanctions. The protest with the embassy was filed yesterday. Zelensky's public statement was done today. So they had gone from publicly telling them, please go after these ships, please don't accept the grain, to publicly talking about it in a polite manner, to public protests about it, to public confrontations about sanctions only after the second ship docks. So when they say, oh, they turned it into a public confrontation, if you take an action while taking an action, because that's the thing, you could say, oh, Israel didn't do anything. Not doing something, especially when you're facilitating theft, that is doing something. And that's my second point. It is doing something. You're actively, whether you can say they're not doing something, they are doing something. And inaction is an example. Like inaction while your state takes in the grain, you're both not doing what you should do and facilitating the theft. How are they supposed to react if you're going to continue this behavior? If you're not even going to follow your own laws when it comes to Ukrainian stolen grain? What's interesting is that we do have a response from the Israeli foreign minister. And instead of saying that they will stop and they will cease doing this, instead he says, oh my gosh, why would Ukraine do this to us? We have been so helpful. We are so supportive of Ukraine. Mind you, they've never given military aid. They've given a hodgepodge of little bits of humanitarian aid, and they gave them some like early warning detection systems when it comes to like detecting like aerial threats. When it came to like developing their air defense system, they did not give them sufficient technology. And the claims that they had actually given them air defense systems that were being made by some people in the Israeli government turned out to later just be like a complete lie, right? Either way, Israel has provided Ukraine some support and has been like, we think that the invasion is bad. But at the same time, they're very cordial with the Russians and they're perfectly happy stealing the grain stolen from them at the moment, it seems, because they're thrashing about in their position. They're not just saying oops and stopping. They want to continue to do it. If they didn't, they would have stopped it. Here's a statement from the Israeli foreign minister.
Clearly, we reject this kind of Twitter diplomacy. And now to the facts.
Yeah, well, then do actual diplomacy, and people won't have to do Twitter diplomacy, which is also called public statements. It's like they did a formal protest at the embassy. That wasn't enough. They did private requests. That wasn't enough. They did polite public requests. That wasn't enough. So now Zelensky's like, okay, fine, sanctions it is. Again, like, despite Ukraine being in such a difficult position, there are European states that would never use the word Israel and sanction in the same sentence. Let alone actually be like, okay, we're preparing them.
Clearly, we reject this kind of Twitter diplomacy. And now to the facts. The Director General of our ministry, spoke earlier today with the Israel Tax Authority, which has begun an examination of the matter. When you examine something, you check the facts. The vessel has not entered the port and has yet to submit its documents. It's not possible to verify the truth of the Ukrainian claims regarding the forgery of the bill of lading. Up until this point, the Ukrainian government has not submitted a request for legal assistance.
They made a diplomatic protest at the embassy. They privately informed them, but the response from the Israelis isn't, oh, they didn't tell us. It's, oh, they didn't make a formal request for legal assistance. Oh, okay. I want to know, well, if there's like somebody stealing like Israel, if they're like somebody going across the border, shooting around, taking something Israeli and leaving, how many like formal requests for legal assistance have to be done before the Israeli Air Force is going to level whatever mountain that they're on or level whatever building that they go into? Like, oh, you didn't make the proper, stop. Okay, I'm sorry. This bureaucracy maxing as an excuse, like, oh, they didn't bureaucracy hard enough. Sorry. Diplomatic protests and private information as we continue to take the stolen grain is just not, that's not enough. That's not enough. Like, come on. Don't be ridiculous. It should be like, we didn't know. If this is true, we will not take the grain. We don't believe that it is good to do that. It is against our laws, and we will follow our laws. That's what a normal country would do. That's what a normal country would say. And this kind of like indignant kind of like, oh, we're your friends and you're so mean to us. Like, dog, they're acquaintances at best. Acquaintances.
Submitted a request for legal assistance. He submitted tweets. This is required when the claims concerned criminal acts committed abroad. Nor has the Ukrainian government provided evidence for its claims.
Be clear, if it was like child trafficking and they had committed child trafficking in Russia and then shipped these children, if they, and they then shipped these children over there and then we're bringing them off the boat, would you need to like, oh, legal protest, child traffic? No. You'd be informed of a crime going on, like a murder or child trafficking, or this. Police would show up and they would arrest those involved. Instead, they allowed the boat to leave port the first time, and now another boat with stolen grain is en route, and the Israelis haven't showed any chutzpah, okay, in going after the stolen grain or going after those, you know, facilitating it. And I bet you this, they will never arrest a single sailor. They will never arrest a single sailor. They will never arrest anybody involved. They will never. What I expect, best case scenario, is they will stop taking more stolen grain because they do not want to damage bilateral Russian-Israeli relations by standing on their values that much. I mean, if they're willing to compromise it in this case, why would they go even further and actually arrest the officials, which they've already been asked to do, which they have not? Arrest them based on what? Arrest them based on the facilitation of stolen grain. Arrest those operating in the shadow fleet transporting stolen grain. That is a crime. If it can be proven that it is a crime, then they can be arrested, or the ship can at least be stopped. It's not like other ships haven't been seized in like the Baltics or in other areas. Like the United States has done it. Some European states have done it. Israel chooses not to do it.
Israel is a state that abides by the rule of law. Israeli authorities are obliged to act in accordance with the law. Legal discussions must be based on evidence. As I said, we reject Twitter diplomacy and we will not be influenced by that.
So is the argument really that there are no Russians in this ship? Please look away. Is that the argument? It needs to be based on evidence? No, because if they informed you and said, hey, these are Russian ships, and then the complaint is, well, you didn't make a formal legal complaint. What? I guess Ukraine can now make said formal legal complaint, but come on. If it was Israeli stolen goods, would it be treated differently? I think it would.
We say again to our Ukrainian friends, if you have any evidence of theft, submit it through the appropriate channels. And I didn't finish. You have a problem that I will elaborate on this issue?
No.
I thought you last thing, it's a bit surprising coming from a country that we supported in international forums, supported in so many ways, including humanitarian help in so many ways, lately with energy generators last winter, but probably this is life. We will stick to our principles.
But not their own laws. Look, either they stop taking the stolen grain, or they can't even follow their own laws. I mean, I don't know what I'm supposed to say here. Okay, they're facilitating the theft. The Egyptians were more honorable about it. Okay, LCC was more honorable about it. It may have, may have been done over a wider period of time, the convincing, but let me just put forward that also the relationship that Israel has with the West is different than LCC's relationship with the West. And so to be stealing from Ukraine or facilitating that stealing in this manner maybe was not expected by the Ukrainians, even if the bilateral relations between Ukraine, a nation state that recognizes Palestine, was one of the first in Europe to do so, at least before this big wave. That their bilateral relations were cold enough that they felt that this was, I don't know. Either way, this is a terrible Israeli public move for how the world will perceive them. It's just not worth the little bit of cheap grain you're gonna get. Just not worth it. It's legitimately just not fucking worth it. Do.